Hello and welcome to another video of Rob's Ramblings. I thought I'd talk today about my passion for driving and how it all started. You'll have seen some of my videos on AccessAdvisr showing how I drive, but I thought I'd sort of bring the backstory behind it. So it all started with my granddad, who was a coach driver for Bluebird Coaches in Weymouth, and he used to tell me stories of how he would go to Longley, Cricket St Thomas, and various places with coach trips, and how he used to love driving. And I think I sort of picked up that passion from him, although I didn't know it at the time. So it started when I was at school. It was a boarding school, and I was about 16. They had a trip to the Transport Road Research Laboratory in Bracknell in Berkshire, and for some reason I was one of the ones that went to go there. And they had cars which were driven by joystick, and they also had a 50-seater coach, which sort of kind of linked back to where the stories that my granddad used to tell me. And I had to go in the car and drove through the cones and knocked a few over. And I had to go in the coach and drove through the cones, and I didn't actually knock anything over because I think I'd listened to the stories my granddad had told me about how to drive a coach and swing it round, make sure you get the front out wide. And so I was really chuffed with that, and it kind of set me thinking, well, maybe I am able to drive, maybe this is something that I'll be able to do. So that was when I was 16, and the only other driving experience I had after that for a long time was when I was at college in Coventry. I did actually get behind a three-wheeler, one of the blue Invercars as they call them, but I couldn't manage the control. You had to push down quite hard, and you had to turn the handle to get the accelerator going, and it was just no good for me. So that was really, I thought, well, nothing's going to happen. But then in the 80s, I saw a company that made different kinds of controls for disabled people. And I wrote to them and said, look, this is my position. I'm really interested in trying to find out more, and would you be able to help me be able to drive? And rather disappointingly, I got a letter. And based on that, we think you'll only be able ever to drive for 5 years, and then you probably give up after that. So I didn't follow it up. I was a bit perturbed by that, really, and a bit put out. And I thought, well, they've judged me on the basis of one letter, and I thought that was a bit rude. But then in the late 90s, I think it was, the government had introduced a driving fund for people who had more severe disabilities and wanted to be able to drive. So in July 2001, I sent off a very long application to the Mobility Equipment Fund. And to show you how long these things actually take, backwards and forwards of paperwork and just making sure I'd sent the right stuff, I found that I'd been accepted, and they offered me a grant of £22,000 towards my first vehicle, which was fantastic. There were lots of reasons why I wanted to drive. I would get fed up with having to ask people for lifts everywhere. I was working full time and relying on people having to give me a lift to work, and if they were off sick or something happened, then I would be at the mercy of hoping that I could find someone else to give me a lift to work. I'd also become a parent for the first time, and I wanted to take my family out on drives. So it's becoming really important to me, and I thought that it would be good if I could do something about it. Just 2 months after getting the grant, I got my provisional license, so that was in June 2002. That was another important milestone for me. The next stage was to work with Automobility Concepts, and you'll have seen some of my videos which I referred to earlier, to get my first ever van fitted. I was so happy to travel up to Hemel Hempstead and back. I was having to get lifts and taxis, but this meant so much to me, and I really thought, well, they can do this. They were a really good crew. They still are. I've worked with them ever since then, and I wanted to get that van fitted. And so it was by July, it was only a year and a bit later after taking my theory test, that I took delivery of my first ever van, and it was a Mercedes Vito, and it was a beautiful van. And just 4 days after taking delivery of my van, I had my first ever lesson. And it was a series of lessons that I had over a period of 12 months. The driving instructor, Mick, was wonderful. I think he'd never seen anything like the van before. I think he admitted afterwards that he was quite nervous about it, but he had for the first few lessons, he had a control that he could use and the brakes, so he was able to have confidence that he was helping me to learn to drive. And it was just over a year later, in March of 2004, that I took my first test. Sadly, I didn't pass that, and I was pretty gutted. But 2 months later, I applied straight away and got a test, and the date is forever etched on my mind, and also I've got a record on my computer, so that helps. 26th of May 2004, I passed my test. I was delighted. I drove back home, and I think my driving instructor at the time shed a tear because he was so happy, and he thought he'd seen the controls and he wondered how it was all going to work out. But it did. And so I've been driving as a driver now since 2004. My first van I did over 72,000 miles in. The last van that I changed over just a few months ago got up to 92,000. And although COVID has restricted me to only a few thousand miles so far, I'm really loving my van. I love driving. It's absolutely fantastic. I guess the point again of this rambling is that I started out with the end of the destination in mind, and that was to be me driving on my own. And although people along the way told me that it might not happen, or they didn't think it would happen, I kept persevering. And it's not all down to me. I mean, it's, the help of my driving instructor, the help of Motability, the help of Automobility Concepts, my wife and daughter for trusting me to actually take them out in the van, when it looked quite scary. But I've done thousands and thousands of miles in the van, in the 3 vans that I've got, and I'm still driving and I'm still loving it. So another rambling, but again, I hope the message is that you take from this is that if you want something, you've got to listen to your heart. People may give you advice, and people may say you might be able to do it or you might not. But in the end, go with your head and your heart and do what you think's right. Well, that's another Rob's Ramble, so I hope you enjoyed it. So until the next time, bye for now.